I was meeting with a client this week who I hadn't talked to in the last few months, and they had some unfortunate news to share. He had been recently diagnosed with cancer and has spent the last couple months in hospitals more than he spent at home. He said the only good news about this, Brian, is that the Medicare plan that we chose has helped save us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, we're going to talk about what are the best Medicare plans for Canadians living in the United States. My name is Brian Haggard. I'm a certified financial planner, chartered financial analyst, and I'm the founder of Retirement and Financial. We help simplify your cross-border retirement plan. One of the issues that we help educate our clients about is medical insurance in retirement. There's a lot of different options that our clients have to deal with. Some of our clients retire prior to 65, so they may have to deal with COBRA insurance or Obamacare, ACA insurance prior to 65. Some of them have to make a decision at 65 to go on to Medicare or not. Others will continue to work past 65, and we'll talk about what Medicare will look like potentially when they retire after the age of 65. But there's a lot of different decisions to make, and unfortunately, if you make the wrong decision, it may be impossible to switch your decision in the future, which could really hinder your long-term medical insurance options. Today, we're going to talk about what is Medicare, what are some of the options, and what are the basics of that Medicare provides, what are some options that you have available in Medicare, and what are the costs going to look like for Medicare. So let's start off with some just basics about Medicare. Medicare is the U.S. retirement health care program. And for most of us, it starts as early as age 65. However, we'll talk a little bit about how it doesn't necessarily start at age 65 for everyone. Now, first of all, the qualification for Medicare is a little bit different for Canadians living in the US than the qualification for Social Security. Typically, if you've just worked in the US and not in Canada, you would have had to have lived and worked in Canada or in the US for 10 years to qualify for Social Security. But because of the US and Canada totalization agreement, it's actually a little bit easier to qualify for Social Security as long as you've combined your work in the US and Canada. That is not the case with Medicare. In order to qualify for Medicare, you have to have worked in the US alone for at least 10 plus years. So you may actually qualify for a Social Security benefit here in the States, but not qualify for Medicare. It's very important for the clients that we work with, if they're planning on staying and retiring here in the States, it's really important they at least get those 10 plus years in of US work, or it's going to get really expensive for retiree healthcare options for them. Now, as I mentioned before, you can start Medicare as early as age 65. A lot of people have questions or concerns about it because if you read some different Medicare sites, it will tell you if you start past 65, you can run into some different fees and penalties for the rest of your life. And that is the case, but there are some different things that can disqualify that. For example, if you delay Medicare past 65 because you were working, because you were covered by an employer's plan already, it's okay to delay Medicare until you've actually given up or stopped working and given up that healthcare insurance through your employer. So not everybody starts at age 65, but almost everybody, if you're retired and you don't have other health insurance options, almost everybody starts Medicare at age 65 because quite honestly, it's probably the best option out there for you. There is a spousal benefit with Medicare, meaning that if you are married and your spouse does not qualify for Medicare, your spouse has not worked in the US for 10 plus years, he or she would in likelihood also be eligible for Medicare just because the working spouse is eligible for Medicare. actually run into a situation just today in which the working spouse was only 62, but he's retired. His wife was 65, has not worked in the United States, but she can still turn on Medicare now because she's eligible under him. So it is possible that a spouse can collect Medicare benefits. The cost is based on income, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what the cost is up in just a few minutes. So a little bit about just when you think about Medicare, when you see Medicare, hear about Medicare, you hear all about these different parts. Medicare has four main parts involved with it. There's Part A, which is hospital insurance. That tends to be more inpatient care, dealing with your large medical emergencies where you might have to stay in the hospital overnight. Part B is your more normal medical insurance. It covers doctor's appointments, emergency room visits, things like that. Part C is the Medicare Advantage plans. That's private health insurance that is sold by insurance companies that kind of helps supplement Medicare. We'll talk more about that as well. And then there's Part D, which is prescription drug coverage. Those make up the four main parts of Medicare. All right, so one of the questions that we get all the time is, all right, Brian, what is the cost to Medicare? And that's a little bit harder than what it might seem like it should be. So Part A is free for Medicare. Part B, everybody has to pay for it. Part B is just basic coverage and you have to pay for it. And the cost of Medicare is based on how much you earned. And to make it even more complicated, it's based on how much you earned 2 years ago. So for example, in 2024, if you started Medicare in 2024, your Medicare cost would be based on how much you earned in 2022. Even if you had Medicare, or even if you've been retired for years, your 2024 Medicare prices are based on 2022 income. Now, the reason behind that is kind of simple. The truth of the matter is, for a lot of us, we find out what the cost is at the end of the year. So for example, at the end of 2023, we found out what the cost was going to be for 2024. Well, the government doesn't know how much you earned in 2023 at the end of 2023, right? You have to file your taxes, and that's when the government ultimately finds out. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay in what you earned or when you earned it and what the price is. Regardless, though, the less that you earn, or I should say the more that you earn, the higher your Medicare Part B monthly premium will be. If you file a joint tax return and you earn less than $206,000, or if you file an individual tax return and you make less than $103,000, the monthly cost is roughly $175 per month. If you have Social Security turned on when you apply for Medicare, that $175 per month will come right off your Social Security. So you're not paying for it out of pocket. If you don't, you would pay it out of pocket. And then eventually when you do turn on Social Security, this would come directly out of your Social Security payment. As you can see, the more that you've earned, the more that your Medicare Part B premiums become, all the way up to nearly $600 per month for the very high earners out there. And so this becomes very costly. And for a lot of our clients, what happens is when they're turning on Medicare, it's because they've been working, right? When they first turn on Medicare, maybe in 2024, they were working, or 2023 and 2022, they still were working and earning a lot of money. Maybe now they're in 2024 and they're about to retire and they're turning on Medicare and they're getting this bill from Medicare for $300, $400, $500 per month, even though they're about to earn a lot less money than what they earned in 2022. If that is the case, it's okay. You can actually dispute your Medicare cost. If you're going to earn less because of a life event, and a life event would be like retiring or working, going from a full-time job to a part-time job, you can actually tell Medicare that. You can dispute your Medicare payment, and you will I see a lot of my clients get quite a bit lower premium by doing that. You'll just have to figure out how much you are going to make going forward. You'll have to tell the government that, and they will lower your Medicare premium. You might get this, it's called an IRMA form, right? After you apply for Medicare, it's the income related monthly adjusted amount is what it stands for. Right before, if you qualify for Medicare, they'll send it to you right before you qualify. If you're on Medicare, they usually send it to you in November or December every month. And again, it's based on your income from 2 years previous. So if your income is going to go down, it's really important that you do dispute that Medicare cost. A lot of people don't know that, and they're paying much more in Medicare costs than they need to. So unfortunately, that's not where the medical expenses or the Medicare expenses end. Most people are not satisfied with just basic Medicare. Most people will end up buying a kind of supplemental or secondary plan to supplement your Medicare benefits. And the two most common plans that you're going to see out there are Medicare Advantage plans. We talked a little bit about those earlier in the third Part C plans. And there's also supplemental plans or Medigap plans out there. I want to talk a little bit about the differences between these, and there are a lot of differences. So Medicare Advantage plans are going to be very similar to what a lot of people are used to under their employer, right? You're going to purchase this through, a large insurance company. A lot of times they're going to be like HMOs or PPO plans. You'll typically find find that you have benefits like in-network versus out-of-network. You typically want to work with local doctors during these Medicare Advantage programs. Now, the really nice things about this Medicare Advantage programs is they tend to be pretty cheap. You might have seen those Medicare ads that they're offering $0 in premium costs with all of these benefits. And Medicare Advantage plans can be $0 per month for premiums. The issue is, though, once you start to use those Medicare Advantage plans, they can become pretty expensive. First of all, your doctor's choices are usually a little limited. You have to use typically somebody who's in network in order to get the best plans and policies for you. You can start to add up some really significant out-of-pocket costs as well if you do have some major medical issues. The other nice things, though, about Medicare Advantage plans is it does include dental a lot of times, and they may also include prescription drug policies as well. So it's kind of like you buy one Medicare Advantage plan, kind of everything is covered for you. And obviously, the more that you pay for a Medicare Advantage plan, the more coverages and the more options you have available to you. Now, one of the negatives of Medicare Advantage is it doesn't typically cover international coverage, or it doesn't cover international accidents. So for example, if you spend a lot of time up in Canada and something happens to you up in Canada and you have a potentially large medical bill up there, you may find that you have some large medical costs because Medicare Advantage plans typically don't cover those expenses. Now, the other option is a supplemental plan or a Medigap plan. And these are different, but for a lot of people, they are the right choice. Now, the negative of a supplemental plan is typically your premiums are going to be a little bit more expensive compared to a Medicare Advantage plan. I've talked a little bit about how some Medicare Advantage plans might have 0 monthly premium. That's probably not going to be the case with supplemental plans. You're going to be paying a little bit more out of pocket every month for those premiums. But here's the best thing about the supplemental plan is you can go to see any doctor in the country, and as long as that doctor is approved by Medicare, you can get any procedure done by those doctors, right? If you have a leg injury or a back injury, and if you're under Medicare Advantage, you'd have to go to typically like your doctor, and then that doctor would have to refer you to another doctor who might specialize in legs or backs. If you're in a supplemental plan, you could go directly to that doctor, that specialist, and say, hey, my back is hurting. What can you do for me? And you might be traveling and you might be in, I just had a client who unfortunately had a medical emergency up in Virginia while he was visiting family, and he lives down in Florida. Well, the good thing was he had a supplemental plan. He was able to visit doctors up in Virginia without having any out-of-pocket costs. So supplemental plans are a little bit different, where you choose the doctors. And a lot of times, supplemental plans, we're going to talk a little bit more about some different supplemental plans, will really minimize your out-of-pocket costs. So, the Medicare Advantage usually has lower premiums, and if you're healthy, it can be fine if you're not seeing a doctor very often. Supplemental plans tend to have a little bit higher premiums, but if you do visit doctors or see doctors, usually the out-of-pocket costs are going to be less. Now, supplemental plans do not cover dental, and they do not cover prescription drugs. Those would be separate plans that you have to buy on top of that. Think of the supplemental plan as almost more like an a la carte package for you, where Medicare Advantage is a little bit more where you buy one and you kind of get everything. Now, there's not one that is best for everybody. I will tell you, though, a majority of our clients do choose the supplemental plans. Yes, they're a little bit more expensive, and that's not ideal. But the great thing about the supplemental plans is a lot of people are comfortable spending a little bit more out of pocket for premiums, knowing that they won't have this large medical emergency bill down the road that they might have to pay for. The other nice thing for Canadians living in the US is if you travel a lot, if you're a snowbird, or not, I wouldn't even say a snowbird, but if you spend some time here in the US, some time up in Canada, you would still have some coverage up in Canada. If a medical emergency happened to you, typically supplemental plans will cover about 80% of international travel emergencies. Another reason a lot of our clients pick a supplemental plan. So let's just compare a couple supplemental plans out there. So, Medicare is kind of like alphabet soup a little bit, right? We have Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D. And then if you choose a supplemental plan, you have Plan A, B, C, G, N, F. There's all of these different plans to choose from. But there's two plans that I find are by far the most popular out there, because quite honestly, they're the most robust plans out there. Plan G and Plan N. Now, the great thing about Plan G, which was really the most popular plan out there, a lot of people years ago were in Plan F. Plan F is no longer allowed. A lot of those people moved to Plan G. And quite honestly, here's the nice thing about Plan G in a nutshell. You can basically get any procedure done anywhere in the country, and you'll essentially have no out-of-pocket costs. The only cost that you have to pay for on Plan G is what's called the Part B deductible, which is $200 a year. When I mentioned earlier that my client, when we were talking, mentioned that the best part about what's happening is I've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical costs, he is on Plan G. It's because, yes, he's paying a little bit more for Plan G. We'll talk about that in a minute per month, but he has had to pay nothing, zero out of pocket, even though he spent over a month in the hospital with a lot of different medical exams and procedures happening. The medical bill was $200,000. He didn't have to pay any of it. So Plan G is great for that. If you want to kind of lock in and know your expenses up front, it's a good plan for you. Again, you're going to have to pay for it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Plan N is very similar. We're seeing more and more of these options kick up for our clients. Here's the major difference between Plan G and Plan N. Plan N, you may have to pay for excess charges. Now, what are examples of excess charges? Co-payments would typically you'd have to pay for out of pocket. So every time you see a doctor, you might have to pay $20 for a copay. If it's a specialist, it might be $50 for a copay. Also, doctors are able to charge up to 15% more than Medicare covers and you'd be on the hook for that under Plan N. Plan G, this is all covered. So you might say, well, why would I choose Plan N over Plan G? Well, Plan N is cheaper, right? You pay less per month for Plan N than what you may pay for Plan G. We tend to find that Plan N is $20 to $25 cheaper. Might vary depending on where you are, but Plan N might be a little bit cheaper than what you'd find with Plan G. So if you're looking for a little bit cheaper option with a lot of things covered, Plan N might be your best option. But in my opinion, if you're looking at like a difference between $20 a month or $25 a month, it's nice to make sure that everything is covered, in my opinion. And so that's one of the great things about Plan G. So let's look at what cost you might be looking for with a just overall Plan G policy, right? What would your Medicare bills be in retirement? So as we talked about, if your income, if you're a joint filer and your income in 2022, 2 years ago, was less than $206,000, your Part B premium would be $175 per month. Again, it would be higher than that if your income is higher, of course, but the Part B premium would be about $175 per month right now. The average Plan G cost currently is $135 per month. Now, again, these are all per person costs, right? So if you are married, both you and your spouse would have these same costs. This is not for a family, this is per person. The average Part D cost, so as I mentioned to you earlier, when you buy a Medigap policy or a supplemental policy like Plan G, it's kind of a la carte. You have to go and buy prescription drug coverage separately. And the average Part D cost in 2024 is currently $56. So if we add on your Medicare Part B plan, plus your average Plan G cost, plus the average Part D cost, you're looking at about $366 per month in total medical expenses. Now, again, if you bought the Part G, pretty much everything should be covered. So that kind of covers you for any out-of-pocket costs besides prescription drugs. Prescription drug costs might have some prescription drug costs, but any medical procedure should be covered by this $366 per month. Now, again, the issue with Plan G is there's no dental insurance. Medicare Advantage programs typically will cover some dental insurance, but Plan G does not. So you'd either want to talk to your dentist or talk to your insurance agent about purchasing dental insurance as well on top of that. Now, some people will ask us, well, Brian, why don't I just start with Medicare Advantage? I'm healthy right now, I'm 65, and if I get sick in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I'll just switch to a Medigap policy at that point. Unfortunately, Medicare has also thought about that, and you can't do that. You can't go from a Medicare Advantage to a Medigap policy without going and getting approved health-wise. And there's a decent chance that if you're sick when you try to make this switch, you may not get approved. So it isn't so easy to just go ahead and switch from a plan or from a Medicare Advantage to a Medigap policy. It is possible that you can move from a Medigap policy, the Plan G, into a Medicare Advantage plan down the road because it's kind of lesser insurance, but you can't go the other way. I realize that this can be complicated. There's a lot of different options. We didn't even talk about different pre-65 options. So if you're looking to work with a specialist who specializes in cross-border financial planning, that's what we do. Our motto here is that we help simplify your cross-border retirement plan. We are a fee-only financial advisor. We don't sell anything or earn any commissions. When we educate our clients about the best Medicare program, it's because we don't earn anything from our clients. We just think it's in the best interest for our clients to understand the best options out there so that they can go on and make informed and good decisions on it. If you're interested, you can go to our website, retiremitten.com, to learn more. Thanks again.